Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. I am Richard Bann. As you can see, we're not too late to catch Early to Bed. And the film's title may have been a play on the recent Fox film called Early to Wed, directed by Hal Roach's friend Frank Borzage. They started out in Hollywood together along with Harold Lloyd and George Marshall. At one time or another, all of them would make movies at Hal Roach Studios. Any film showing credits for Hal Roach, Leo McCarey, George Stevens, Stan Laurel, and Oliver Hardy is going to be of interest, and Early to Bed is no exception. The opening exterior scene, and the only exterior in the film, was added during the retakes phase by Leo McCarey, and later we'll get into why. The location shown is about an 8-iron shot away from the front door of the Culver Hotel in Media Park, where Culver and Venice Boulevards cross. The company could practically walk there from Hal Roach Studios, though I doubt they did. You can see the same park bench and those same 3 trees behind it with sound in the opening scenes of Our Gang's Bouncing Babies made the following year. Anyway, it's a solid opening, and we're disarmed by the gags with this adorable dog, Buster. The boys are vagrants, a little down and out, and so we're pulling for everyone. Then at the end, in another sequence shot by McCarey, the climax at the ornate water fountain, with the Hardy look-alike marble cherubs or gargoyles, everyone acknowledges how good that is, too. Robert Youngson certainly thought so because he excerpted it for his 1968 anthology film, The Further Perils of Laurel and Hardy. And yet seemingly no one, except maybe author Charles Barr, is going to select Early to Bed as his favorite Laurel and Hardy silent comedy. It seems fans are divided about this film's merits. Early to Bed was issued to movie theaters by MGM on October 6th of 1928 as the second release of the 1928-29 season. It followed Should Married Men Go Home and preceded Two Tars. Laurel and Hardy were really coming into their own here. A text title card tells us it's 3 a.m. at Hardy Manor, and we see the master is dressed to the nines and has been celebrating with a little too much champagne, but during Prohibition, mind you. So he's inebriated, tipsy, and blitz. He's spiffed. So right away, you think of a similarly well-off, well-attired, and inebriated Charlie Chaplin in his classic two-reel comedy, For Mutual, made a dozen years earlier, called 1 a.m. The Chaplin Lone Star Mutuals, like the John Wayne Lone Star Westerns, are probably the most reissued packages of pictures ever produced. Someone at the Lot of Fun could easily have seen a reissue exhibition of 1 a.m. and been inspired to offer this variation for Laurel and Hardy. Interior set design for Hal Roach comedies is always impressive, and the studio redressed everything shown here the following year to use again in Wrong Again. And there is something else that we shall see again in Wrong Again. That prop painting on the wall coming up shortly is Blue Boy, the key plot point in that film. In what seems like another lifetime now, I was a vice president at Black Hawk Films. For decades, the only way anyone could see Early to Bed was on 8 and 16 millimeter prints that we sold in the non-theatrical market. Ken Easton founded and ran the company, and in what we would call today, unfortunately, a politically correct decision, he rewrote the, quote, "But She's Chinese" text title card conceived by H.M. Walker to read instead, "But She's Married." We have reinstated the correct, authentic, original language. Historical accuracy is very, very important, and that's 2 varies. So rewriting history is wrong. It's just wrong. We should learn from history. It's there to learn from. We shouldn't rewrite it or tamper with it and lie about it. No one has conferred upon us any kind of God license to doctor and change the work of these geniuses. That's what communists did in the old Soviet Union, quote, where the future is known and it's the past that's always changing. They'd assassinate some Soviet leader like Leon Trotsky, then write him out of the history books and burn the old one. Suffocating PC nonsense has no place in film restoration and preservation. We should always want to see exactly what 1928 movie patrons saw, and also the same way that they experienced it, if at all possible. Notwithstanding that there is anything wrong with being Chinese, because of course there isn't. we have this title card, and there it is, that was changed by my old boss, Ken Easton, from "But she's Chinese" to read instead, "But she's married." Our heroes, ages 38 and 36, are the only actors exclusively carrying the load in this true real comedy, same as they had to do a couple years later in Bratz, these being the sole shorts ever made constituting pure, undiluted Laurel and Hardy entertainment. But this is not to diminish the contribution of little Buster as opposed to Buddy the dog. There was more than one dog named Buster working in motion pictures at the time, and you can see another one with W.C. Fields in It's a Gift. But this one, this little scene stealer, was owned and trained by Tony Campanaro. He was the Italian national who specialized in training dogs and monkeys for movies. His number one simian, named Josephine, is Buster Keaton's sidekick in The Cameraman. Tony Campanaro also managed the whole menagerie of animals kept at the rustic Hal Roach Studios location ranch, the former Arnaz Ranch, a.k.a. the Roach Ranchero on Robertson Boulevard, less than a mile north of the studio on the way to Hollywood from Culver City. This short, well, I never knew that there was any controversy attached to Early to Bed until I started expressing my fondness for it. Many in the world of L&H fandom, however, do not care for this one, but I've always enjoyed Early to Bed as a change of pace for its experimentation and for the variation on Laurel and Hardy's usual comedy constructs, though I recognize many fans do not share this view. Is it that some think Mr. Hardy is mistreating Mr. Laurel, or is it that Mr. Hardy is inebriated? We need to recognize that we don't behave the same when we have been overserved. The way I see it, Hardy just wants to play. Innocent fun. They're two grown-up kids is all. As Hal Roach always explained, the key to their comedy was displaying the innocence of children, and besides, by the end, Stan sure does exact revenge and get even with the much bigger Ollie. As for possibly resenting the way Mr. Hardy interacts with Mr. Laurel, how is it any different than what we see in A Chump at Oxford? Ollie is having fun playing with Stan in Early to Bed, but Stan is clearly bullying Ollie and even calling him names in A Chump at Oxford. No mistaking that. I was debating someone on this who said, but Stan is not Stan when he is mean to Babe in A Chump at Oxford. So I pointed out that the real Stan is the bullying one. He only became the Stan everyone likes because of the original bump on the head in the story. According to the film's narrative, Stan's real character there is an oppressive, pompous ogre, Lord Paddington. He's really Lord Paddington, isn't he? My friend summoned the line from Dirty Work and Surrendering, quote, "I have nothing to say." So, another thing, unfortunately, today, we are so familiar with all the great films that came after Early to Bed and which explored their relationship in so many areas that we cannot see this film through the eyes of a 1928 audience, which back then may have only briefly been exposed to the world of Laurel and Hardy. They wouldn't have had the same expectations we do now watching these pictures. And I've heard arguments that the filmmaker should have reversed the roles and made Stan the beneficiary of this inheritance. I would say first, Stan Laurel obviously didn't share that view. Otherwise, since we know how these films were made, he would have interposed his objection and not consented to what we see play out. Second, Laurel could not have enacted that role as well as Babe Hardy does because Hardy is clearly a superior actor. Third, I wouldn't want to put myself in the position of presupposing that I know better than the Hal Roach Studios brain trust, particularly the comedy and storytelling instincts of McCary, Laurel, and Roach. I wouldn't presume to second-guess that team, would you? That maybe I know better than McCary, Laurel, and Roach? Not likely. I just think that some fans are reading too much into this, seeing the film through a very personal prism of cognitive selectivity of their own making, allowing them to project negativity for whatever reasons that isn't on screen, nor in the intentions of the filmmakers, obviously. I mean, how can people see cruelty in Hardy's ever-smiling, playful face, ever with a twinkle in his eye? He just wants the too conscientious, too serious Stan who continually resists to join in on the fun. Finally, if you're still down on Early to Bed, try seeing this comedy with an audience. I think you'll be surprised how well it plays. And as we reach the end of Reel 1, we see evidence of nitrate decomposition. And I wonder if fans might like Early to Bed better if it looked better or was derived from a lower generation of the domestic camera negative instead of the lesser alternate export neg with the second best camera angles. The print quality is a little soft and not exactly sparkling, which at this late date cannot be helped. Of course, we're lucky to have what we do have. The best surviving preprint material and the element from which all copies for all media have been sourced for viewing all throughout the sound films era down through today has been the one lowest generation extant 35mm nitrate element, an indifferently made 35mm dupe negative derived from a lavender or fine grain master that was struck at some point from the export or second camera neg with flash titles. For Kirsch Media in Munich long ago, as opposed to what we are seeing here, which is the fine work performed by Serge Bromberg in Paris, we did our own nitrate conversion and preservation on Early to Bed in 1993. And winding through the nitrate at the time, I saw that the dupe neg in question was printed on so-called no-name stock with no edge code, so we cannot date it now. And the straw hat, dark jacket, and white pants that Hardy wears in some scenes here must have belonged to him personally, rather than the studio wardrobe department, because he wore this exact same outfit the year before in the Max Sennett two-reeler called Crazy to Act. So his, quote, new spring outfit has to be at least a year old. In his essential Laurel and Hardy book, Randy Skretvedt notes that off-screen, Stan and Lois Laurel moved into their own mansion right before Leo McCarey shot those retakes as mentioned. Quote, now Stan had his own mansion, Randy writes, and he didn't have to be the butler, end quote, though not for so very long. In the mistake of his life, only a few years later, he and Lois Laurel divorced. She got that house at 718 North Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills. She still had it almost 4 decades later to rent to Hal Roach when his move to London and New York was unavailing in the attempt he made to revive his corporation after Hal Jr. had plunged the studio into bankruptcy, but that's another story. Early to Bed was planned and developed in the early part of May 1928. Principal photography commenced on Monday, May 21st and concluded on Tuesday, May 29th. Scenes were directed by someone new on the lot of fun, a man named Emmett Flynn. Hal Roach was just then returning from a worldwide tour with his wife, trying to save their marriage, and he and likely others were not happy with an assembly of the first cut, and the initial sneak preview was disappointing. So Leo McCarey had to step in as the film doctor. Neither the opening in the park nor the closing scenes with the Hardy look-alike gargoyles were contemplated in the shooting script. Retakes were made and new scenes were written and shot by McCarey on June 18, 19, and 25. So 3 more shooting days to fix everything, though as I say, not everyone agrees that they did fix everything. The problem had been the direction or indirection as conducted by this outsider, Emmett Flynn. He was brought on board with high hopes by either Roach or McCarey. Only in his 30s, Flynn had an impressive resume, helming expensive, major feature films at Fox and Goldwyn with important stars like Tom Mix, John Gilbert, Mary Miles Minter, and George O'Brien. But as with so many, in spite of it being the Prohibition era, Flynn had a drinking problem. Following Early to Bed, Flynn made only 3 more films before arrests for public drunkenness and failure to pay alimony landed him in San Quentin prison, of all places. San Quentin! By 1937, at age 44, he was dead of alcoholism. Sad story. Anyhow, Hardy, despite being overserved himself, just looks great here, and he gives off an air of being hopeful, aspirational, enthusiastic, successful, etc. The man simply seems to be having a wonderful, spirited time making this lively movie. I mean, he dances, he takes falls gracefully, he's bursting with mischief, fun, and playful energy. You gotta like that. Hardy was a big man, and yet you marvel at the sheer athleticism in performing the great gag coming up where he races around the staircase and tries to save that vase from destruction. How did he do that? And on probably just one take, as per usual. And such timing on all this. As I say, coming up shortly. I can't ever recall ever discussing this film with any Hal Roach Studios alumni except for one person, Bob Davis, member of the transportation department there forever and someone with a lifelong connection to the Hal Roach family. As people, Bob Davis said he much preferred Stan Laurel to Babe Hardy, saying that Stan was always full of fun, laughing, totally accessible, someone who was everyone's friend at the studio, and how Stan was always putting his arm around everyone he'd see, whereas Babe Hardy was quiet, reserved, a little standoffish. I gathered that Bob's reaction to Hardy was similar to the way Lucille Hardy perceived and sized up her future husband when she first met him, mistaking his dignified reserve for a lack of warmth. And I suppose it was the same way for Felix Knight when he encountered and did not care for Babe Hardy while shooting Babes in Toyland. Anyway, Bob Davis was not Mr. Hardy's biggest fan, but he said he enjoyed Early to Bed because Hardy was so exuberant here, referring to the excerpt he had just seen at the time from The Further Perils of Laurel and Hardy. So that Hardy Bob liked, but it was not something one would have observed on any Laurel and Hardy set, according to Bob Davis. As for the wonderful concluding sequence showing the water fountain and the gargoyles, the curious thing is that the studio issued 32 publicity photos on Early to Bed. I have them all. Not a single one documents this memorable climactic sequence. No idea why. Where was Stax Graves during those 3 days of retakes? Conversely, there's a posed behind-the-scenes still representing footage filmed for but excised from the final cut. It shows Stan dressed as the butler, but clearly out of character, and Ollie in polka dot pajamas. Both are beaming, and it's a great still, which we used in the big picture book that Jack McCabe, Al Kilgore, and I did long ago. The cutscenes must have shown the butler trying to get his tipsy master dressed for and into bed, at last, after a night of carousing. These are the same pajamas that Hardy wears under his bathrobe in Scenes for Helpmates 4 years later. Then 7 years later, it's Patsy Kelly's turn to wear these same polka dot PJs in her short with Thelma Todd called Top Flat. And another curious still showing the one-sheet poster that exhibitors back then could buy and display for pennies. Today you couldn't buy that poster for less than $10,000. But on it, the poster shows an obviously pre-code topless female spouting water. There actually is such a statue as part of the fountain on screen and in the film, but you have to know where to look for it. In the back of the shot, you can first glimpse her on the far right, then she gradually moves to the center as the camera is repositioned. You never really see, or at least notice this though, because your eyes are always fixed on what Hardy is doing. In his Laurel and Hardy book, Bill Everson calls the closing sequence at the water fountain one of the most captivating routines they ever did, and how it must have delighted Buñuel, Dali, and other surrealists. They actually borrowed this from an earlier Roach comedy with Mabel Normand called Should Men Walk Home? Babe Hardy was given a supporting part in that one. The corresponding L&H roles were enacted by the then not-so-heavy gravel-voiced Eugene Pallette and Crichton hailed for Hardy, endlessly spouting streams of water. So you've got William K. Everson praising the picture, then Charles Barr rates Early to Bed a full 4 stars, rhapsodizing about it as, quote, an extraordinary tour de force. The film consists entirely of their relationship. I find Early to Bed's last section very moving, like that of A Chump at Oxford, which it answers 12 years later, end quote. And I happen to solicit the opinion of a third distinguished British film history author, Kevin Brownlow. On behalf of himself and his wife, Caroline, Kevin told me in a recent email, quote, I can't thank you enough for conjuring up Early to Bed for us. I first looked up my index card, and there was a rave review from when I was younger. I found it a scream, end quote. Again, I wouldn't want to be the one who would second-guess, challenge, and debate the likes of Leo McCarey, Stan Laurel, Hal Roach, William K. Everson, Charles Barr, and Kevin Brownlow on the merits of and the decisions made in constructing this film. So we see our heroes come together in laughter and friendship at the end, with renewed hope for their future, and you identify that. You can believe in that. Their friendship transcends any consideration of power and money. That's the point of the film, and it's uplifting. All through the picture, as I say, there's an athletic Babe Hardy radiating nothing but positive energy, trying to have a great time, and trying, though without much success, to involve his pal in the same spirit of fun. Well, I'm glad that's all cleared up. So until next time, I'm Richard Band saying, this has been Early to Bed. Hope you enjoyed it, and good night.